Okay, guys, I've been a little bit under the weather, so I may have a little bit of a scratchy voice, but it is time to move on to our client web application. And let's open up our app and our client folder to take a look at what we already have. So again, we open this client folder in our main Ranker course repository, which you should already have. You'll notice some things like a Tailwind CSS config with some basic color definitions, like we'll have an orange and purple palette added from the colors that Tailwind provides. And so this also means we'll be using Tailwind CSS, which basically has some pretty easy to use classes, CSS classes, for adding things like padding, margins, borders, colors. I think if you understand basic CSS, you won't have any problem with this, other than maybe copying or duplicating the setup of it in your own code. We also have Storybook, as you can see in this Storybook folder, with some config that was set up by Storybook. And more importantly, we have these stories, which basically set up demo versions of our components and mostly our UI components, but I think also I have some nomination form, participant list, and result list components that you can look at in Storybook. To run Storybook, we can just run npm run Storybook from the root. And once this is done, I'll show you in the browser how it looks. So here's what it is. So for example, we'll have components like a sheet that slides up from the bottom. So if I change this to false and true, you can see there's a little animation. You can see there's a close button that when you hover, it highlights a little. And if I click the close button, you'll see that a closing prop is called callback function. And so that just kind of shows you how this works. It shows you if you have a lot of text that it scrolls. We'll also, for example, soon in the next tutorial, use this count selector to select the maximum number of votes per voter. And for example, you can set the initial value, you can set the step size, and the min and max of this counter. So for example, the min is 0, so if I click -0, you can see that this is now disabled. Anyway, we'll be able to look at all of our components so you don't have to rebuild them all. I didn't want this course to be about building React UI. Let's shrink these. And if we go to main.tsx, this is where we mount our React application at the root ID of the index.html here. And we are mounting the app component. And if we go to app.tsx, you can see right now that we're just rendering a welcome component, which is in the pages. So for our main kind of screens that pop up, we'll call those pages. And so if we go to welcome right now, it just shows welcome to Ranker. Now what I'm going to do is open another terminal and then run npm run start. And then on port 8080, I think, for our app, yep, there it is, we will be able to see this running. So I'm going to go here and open up 8080, and you can see right now our local host 8080, we just have the title Welcome to Ranker, and that will be our starting point. As a reminder, you can always follow along with this tutorial by going to the Ranker course repo at Jacob SN Goodwin. 7 stars, we're doing a little better now. Don't forget to like and subscribe and to star my repo. No, I don't do that stuff because you guys aren't idiots, you know how to do it. Anyway, so to run the application, you can follow these instructions. And if you want to like clone the last branch I was working on, you could just run this npx degit and then use like branch 16 since this is tutorial 17. And you can find all the branches named here. So in this welcome page, that's where we'll start doing a little work. We're going to keep this sort of outer container component, which is a column flex with the items justified and centered, and it takes up the full height of the screen. That's what this h-full means. If you hover, you can kind of see what these classes actually do, which is nice. So it makes it this basically a full height container. We have an h1 title saying welcome to Ranker. And then beneath this, we're going to add some buttons to create a new poll or join an existing poll. So right underneath this h1, let's add a div, and this will have an upper margin. That's what my means, like vertical, y meaning the y-axis of 3 rem. And so each of these my1, 2 counts as like a quarter rem. It will be a flex column, so the items will be spaced across the height, and those will be justified and centered. Then I have some classes that I've added like box and button orange, and you can see these in index.css. So if we just look for box, you can see that I'm basically creating a rounded border with a medium rounding, a border width of 2, and you can hover again to see what these actually mean. It'll be gray, it'll have some padding vertical, PYX padding horizontal, semi-bold font, it will have some transitions so that when you hover that the box, has some opacity, and we'll see that shortly. And then I had like a button purple, and so you can see these styles just kind of color the borders of the particular box. Let's save this and then go ahead and see what it looks like. But let's also notice that when we click these buttons, we'll get some console log saying go to create poll or go to join poll, and we'll add that functionality shortly. So if we go back and then let's open up the dev tools and maybe the console for now, and let's click these buttons. It says go to create poll and go to join poll. So currently our app component just mounts this welcome page. And we can see that if we go to our app.tsx file, this is all that it renders. But I want to create a sort of container that can switch between different pages. For example, we're soon going to have a join existing poll page and create new poll page. So let's create a component called pages at the root of our client project or source. And we'll call this pages.tsx, not to be confused with the folder pages. And so this is where we'll kind of have a container that will kind of animate when we go from one page to the next. For now, we won't really do any animation, but we'll just export our welcome page inside of a simple container. So we'll make sure to import React because Vite requires that, or at least this version of Vite did. And then we'll import the welcome page and we'll display it in this container, which will kind of be the main container for our app that will have a max width of a small screen, which I think is like 720 pixels, so more like a tablet width. And then it'll have some margin auto horizontally, some padding vertically and horizontally, and then the overflow Y is for scrolling. And so we mount our welcome page in that. And let's save and take a look. Aha, so we don't have anything because we aren't actually rendering our pages component anywhere. So now we'll need to go into our app component and import these pages so we can get rid of this welcome, and we can instead import pages and then replace this welcome with pages. And hopefully if we save that, then we'll see something on the screen. There it is. There's our page that we previously had. And I think it's now centered. And if we look at the code, or if we inspect the DOM, we can see that our page is basically this sort of column. So you can go and look at the widths and styles if you want, but that's kind of our main column page for this app. The next thing we need to do is a way to change from, this welcome page into the create page or join page, which we haven't yet created, but we will. And I had previously planned on using this router called Wouter to do that. And I really actually recommend this. This is a really lightweight, good router. However, for this application, I think using a router ends up being a little bit overkill. I don't really need to, go and change the path or anything. If I go to create poll, there's no reason for me to actually change the URL or anything. So we're just going to actually use our state management to set a key which says which page we're on, and then that will control which component we show. We have yet to create any sort of state, and we are going to do that by creating a file in source called state.typescript or state.ts. And for our state management, we will be using a library called Valtio. This is Valtio on GitHub. It's a really cool little proxy state management system, and all you have to do to create some state is to wrap an object with this proxy, and then you're able to just mutate it by just mutating the actual state itself. And then if you want to see a current snapshot of the state or to determine when it changes, we can use this React hook called useSnapshot and get the current version of the state. And this is an example where you also mutate it with a button. And what's kind of cool is this will only re-render on state.countChange because that's the only one that's available here or used here. So that's pretty cool. So we're going to define our state. So we'll import the proxy that I just showed you from Valtio, and then we're going to store all of our possible page names in an enum called app page. And so right now we just have a welcome page, create page, and join page, which will then be defined as these actual lowercase strings here. Our app state will currently only hold a current page, and this is just a type, mind you, this is not the actual state. But then to create the initial state, we'll give state a type of app state and then wrap the object with the proxy, and we'll have the current page, which will be that welcome page, which we are showing. Then for those mutations or mutating of the states, I'm actually going to export an actions object with various methods. So what we need now is one to set the page, and we're going to be able to set the app page, which is a type app page, and then we'll set state.currentPage to whatever is passed as the argument of this function, and that will change our page. And then we'll export the state and options or actions as named exports. So that's about it for today on the state, but I want to show you next how to set up some dev tools so we can actually see in our browser our full current state snapshot. So one cool thing about Valtio is that it allows us to actually make use of the Redux dev tools to see our state, and there are other state management tools that do this as well that hook into Redux dev tools. And to install it, I recommend that you use a browser extension like I'm using Chrome, and so you can find those extensions here, or you can follow these instructions to install it as a standalone application. So let's instantiate these tools in our app.tsx file. And to do so, I'm going to import DevTools. I guess it's not giving me the auto completion, so it's a named export. And it's going to be from Valtio. And I think /utils package. There we go. And so then to use these dev tools, we need to then just import our state, and then we just call dev tools with the state, and let's import that from the state we just created. And then we can give it a little nice title to show in the dev tools. So app state in this case, and maybe add a semicolon for kicks. Before we actually look at how these dev tools work, let's actually now set the page or change the page when we click the join existing poll or create poll buttons. So in this case, we'll just call actions and we'll import that from the state. Remember, we exported state and actions from our state, and then we'll use set page, and we can use that enum app page. So I also exported this enum from there, and maybe I should define that enum somewhere else, but I'm already done with it, whatever. And then we'll do something similar here. Set page, and this will be app page.join. All right, so let's save that. And then I want to see the state actually change when I click these buttons now. So I'm going to open up, I have Redux DevTools here. So it says current page is welcome. Now what happens if I create new poll? Awesome, it says create now. If I click join existing poll, you see the action that was actually called to is called set current page. So you can actually manually fire these actions in a way, but that's a little more advanced. Go ahead and look at the Valtio documentation for how to do that. But we can change the page state, which is what matters for now. So now I actually want to create the pages for when we click these buttons and make it so that we go to those pages. We're not actually going to create any like serious pages right now, but we'll kind of scaffold them out. So we'll have one create.tsx, and let's go ahead and make the other one, which is join.tsx. And for create, let's just add some boilerplate. So this will just be a page that says enter poll topic, which eventually they will do. There will be a form to create a poll with a particular topic. And go ahead and copy some of these styles as you need them. And then we're going to create the join as follows. And there it is, and you'll enter a code provided by your, in quotes, a friend. Now, back in the pages, I want to create a config that maps the page route that we're on, or the page location and state, to the actual component. So above the actual React component, let's define this config. And so I want to import app page from state. And then we'll need to import the create and join components as well. And so basically it'll just map whatever page we're on to the component to render. Now we're going to use a library called react-transistion-group, and specifically we're going to use the CSS transition of that library to animate or slide our components in from the bottom to the top. Now the way CSS transition works is we provide a base name for classes, and that class name is going to be page, and then we kind of suffix that page class name with various names for what to do when the page is entering. So let me show you what I mean. That was kind of just gibberish. So we have a page, and then we have a page enter. So before the page enters, we want it to have a 0 opacity, meaning that you can't see it. It's like see-through, transparent, and it's translated down 100%. But then when it's entering or it's active, it will then become fully opaque, meaning not transparent, and we'll translate it up to its normal height, meaning translate Y0, and it will be over 300 milliseconds. So we're going to transform or animate the opacity and transform properties over 300 milliseconds. And then we also kind of do the reverse to exit the page. In fact, it looks like when we exit by flowing up to negative 100% Y. So we will be applying these classes to our CSS transition. Now we're going to need to do a little bit of refactor here. So first of all, let's just make a React fragment. And then we're going to kind of iterate over the entries in that route config by using object.entries of route config. Now entries gives us both the key, which would be like app-page.welcome, which is just represents a string of lowercase welcome, as you can see here. And then entries also gives us the value, which is the actual component. So we'll map over those. And when you do entries, it actually gives you the key value in an array pair. And so the page is the key, or the page name maybe, and the component is the value. And so then this needs to return something. And this is going to return the CSS transition. So I'm just going to copy and paste the CSS transition because it's a bit much. And right now it's going bonkers because this is all invalid. And then inside of that, we're going to place this div with the page, mobile height, and so forth inside of the transition. And I'll explain what these CSS transitions mean soon. And so instead of rendering the welcome component, we're going to render whatever the actual component in this map is. So this timeout is basically the transition duration, and it should match the ones that we use for the actual animations here. Or I guess these are CSS transitions, not animations. And maybe there's a way to like define a CSS variable and then use that variable in your React code so that you don't have to hard code these, but it's easy enough for now to just copy 300 between here and index.css. These are those class names I was referring to, meaning to use page/exit, page/enter active, etc. Unmount on exit means that if you remove this particular page belonging to this key, then it will be unmounted. Now, how is it mounted in the first place? That is by means of this in property. Now, what we're going to do to determine which page is in or transitioned in or showing is we're going to use that app state we created. To use the app state, we can use snapshot, which I showed earlier. So I'm going to define the current state, or maybe you could call it the current snapshot or something. And we're going to use snapshot from Valtio with the actual state that we'll import from state. Now with that, we can determine which page to show by matching this page, or this one that we're mapping over, with the current states page. So we can say if page triple equals current state dot app page, or I think it's called current page, then that's the page to show. And it will animate that particular page or component matching that page into view. So let's save this And let's take a look-see. Let's try clicking create poll. We should see the state change, the current page. And great, and now it shows enter a poll topic. We're on the create page. Now I don't have any way to go back, so I have to hard refresh the application here. And then we'll try clicking join existing poll here. And we go and we see enter code provided by a friend. And I had to refresh my browser there for some reason, but we can see in the Redux DevTools that we're on the join current page. All right, guys, I look forward to seeing you next time when we'll work on actually creating a poll and reaching out to our API to create the poll in Redis. See you then.